know what she said, she might just change your life.
I'm Christine Bentley in studio with Sharon Caddy, and joining us now is a divorce lawyer specializing in custody, access, child, spousal support, equalization, the whole financial complex negotiations. And her name is Reesa Heft. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you
Welcome.
for having me.
Now, you've been practicing law for a while, and you have a case that's pretty juicy.
I have several cases that are pretty juicy.
Well, the one that we're talking about today is the one between former Toronto Symphony CEO Jeff Melanson and his estranged wife Eleanor McCain.
That is correct. However, I am not the lawyer for either one of those parties, but I have been watching what's been going on, and I'm here to share some of my thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Well, what's actually really interesting about this case is that Ms. McCain is asking for an annulment, which is highly unusual. And I think in all the years that I've been practicing, I cannot recall any time, maybe once or twice, that people have come in actually asking for an annulment, but I have never actually gone through the procedure of having an annulment take place.
So what constitutes grounds for an annulment versus a divorce?
Well, okay, there's two kinds of annulments. First, there's a religious annulment, which is obviously between you and your God, and then there's a legal annulment. So an annulment really means that the marriage is void right from the beginning. It's as if it never happened. A divorce would mean that the marriage is now dissolved. So you're still husband and wife, but now you're former husband and wife.
Ended a contract, basically.
Well, in some cases there's a contract, in some cases there's no contract. But in order to get an annulment, there's specific grounds that have to be met. And if they're not, you're not going to get an annulment. You're just going to go and get a divorce the way most people do. So the grounds for an annulment are, first of all, marrying someone who's already married. That would
be good.
Yeah. Shotgun wedding. So if you were forced into the marriage, or if you entered into the marriage under duress, that's a ground for annulment. Again, difficult to prove. It's an evidentiary issue. Lack of mental capacity. And that would include the one when you were too drunk to know that you were getting married.
I think the Vegas wedding.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Vegas with Elvis.
Yeah.
Then marrying someone who's too closely related to you, such as your brother or sister.
Oh, yeah.
So that's grounds for annulment. A marriage not being consummated. And what's interesting about this ground is that you had to not have known at the time of marriage that the marriage could not be consummated, that one person couldn't or wouldn't have sex. And it can't be the person who couldn't or wouldn't have sex who asks for an annulment on that ground. It has to be the other spouse.
Okay.
And another ground would be that if you were under the age of 18 and you didn't have parental consent. And my favorite one, if you didn't know that the ceremony was actually a real marriage.
Oh.
Okay.
That sounds like a plot line from Friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to fall into one of these grounds in order to get an annulment. Otherwise, if you don't, you're getting a divorce.
So, obviously, the purpose of getting an annulment means that you don't then have to split assets, which you might in a divorce.
Maybe.
Maybe?
Maybe. So if you get an annulment, usually if you're getting a divorce, there could be financial obligations such as support. So if you're not married and there is an annulment, if there's child custody issues, child support issues, that would not be affected by whether you're getting an annulment or a divorce. You're still going to have those obligations.
Right.
Spousal support. If you've been living together for more than 3 years, annulment or no annulment, you're still going to be considered spouses.
Well, that's your
common law.
Right.
Exactly. So, annulment or no annulment, you may or may not have a spousal support obligation. And then property, it would depend.
But why would somebody choose one over the other?
Well, I'm actually going to bring it back to the case that we started talking about, the McCains and the Melans and Mr. Melanson. So in that particular case, they probably have a marriage contract, and the marriage contract terms probably go into effect when they're married. And by not having a marriage or by annulling the marriage contract therefore doesn't go into effect. Also, it might be something perhaps she purchased or he purchased a home after the marriage and it becomes a matrimonial home. And if you're not married and the marriage gets annulled, if the home isn't jointly owned, then it's not going to get treated like a matrimonial home. So there's probably some serious financial implications specific to that case that would make an annulment more advantageous than a divorce.
So, but I'm looking through some of the things here, and this looks like a typical divorce situation. What grounds is she claiming for an annulment?
Well, in all honesty, I don't know what grounds, and when I went through them myself...
It looks like a divorce to me.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, neither of them were married. There was no forced marriage, because what I understand, there was actually 2 wedding ceremonies. There was a private ceremony in 2012, and then 6 months later, or 8 months later, there was a public ceremony. So in that instance, they can't say they didn't know it was a marriage.
No.
But she is claiming that she was tricked into marriage.
Tricked how?
Twice.
I have no idea.
Exactly.
Twice. Yeah.
Twice, exactly.
Man,
Twice.
fool me once.
Whoa.
That's tough to prove when you married him twice.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, they're both making a lot of allegations, but she's made allegations that, and again, they sound like divorce allegations.
They do.
That he was on Ashley Madison.
He maintained an Ashley Madison account, and that
Well, that's all divorce stuff, though. That's not annulment
severe
stuff.
rage and anger
Exactly.
management. That's what we're saying. This sounds like a typical high level spiteful divorce.
So how long has this been in the courts?
I don't think it's been there very long. I mean, I think maybe about a few months.
Well, I'm looking at the lawyer who represents him, and I'm thinking it'll be there for the next 10 years.
Who's that?
Harold Nyman.
Oh, okay.
But because these things tend to drag out, don't they?
They can. There's a movement now to try and have these things resolved sooner rather than later. They try, if a matter is obviously going to go to a trial before a judge, then they try and push it along, and usually now it's between 2 and 3 years. If it takes longer than that, it's probably because the parties aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
But I'm thinking, Reesa, that in a situation like this where there's a lot of money involved, where people are alleging that somebody is, got not mental issues, but behavioral issues, rage and anger management, I can already visualize tons of experts being called in and people having to go, lawyers on either side asking for assessments here and assessments there, and
well,
does that not slow things down?
It can, except in a case like this where the issues to be decided are strictly monetary. What's the difference who has anger issues? It's not going to change how much support one party's going to get. It's not going to change if there's going to be a division of property. It's not going to change that either. So I can't see an assessment having any relevancy in a case like this.
And well, there's rage and anger issues expressed from both sides.
Right.
They're both claiming that of the other. What a pair.
Now let me ask you. This is a high profile case because he had a high profile, has a high profile, and she, too, and the family has a high profile, and there's lots of money involved. Do you see this kind of thing with the average Joe? I mean, people who have what I would call
regular
normal jobs and live in suburbia, and there's nothing.
Absolutely.
They're not on the front page of the Star every second day?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. Hurt feelings, anger, it goes with divorce. It goes with divorce and, dissolving a relationship. So, yes, absolutely, you're going to find the same degree of hostility in your, as you're calling them, your normal average person as you would in these high-profile people. The only difference is we're only interested in hearing about the high-profile ones. You really don't want to hear about your neighbor who has rage management issues.
But in the years, the last, let's say, 20 or 30 years, have things not been sort of changed? So I know that they're trying to make it faster and quicker and not have these long, drawn-out battles in court, because our courts are already jammed with everything. But is that succeeding? Mediation and arbitration and whatever they're doing now?
Absolutely. So now the way they've done it is there's several steps that you have to take before you can actually get to a trial, and each step is designed to give the parties another opportunity with the assistance of a judge to settle. And we call them conferences. So there's case conferences, settlement conferences, and at each of those steps the parties are encouraged to come to an agreement, and they're told by the judge, which is a more somber source than a lawyer, that if you go to trial, it's going to cost you a lot of money, and that's money that your family won't have, but your lawyers will have.
Yes.
And people are starting to understand that by proceeding to a lengthy court battle, that at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones who lose out, and their lawyers are going to go home.
Win. Now, before we run out of time, though, getting back to the rich folk, I wanted to, the Panama Papers, this has really had some effect, I think, on what people are thinking about hiding money, if you have money to hide.
Well, that's the big question. If you have money
If you have money. I don't have any money to hide. In fact, I'm trying to find any hidden money that might be somewhere.
Well, I always tell everyone my offshore money is the couple of bucks I lost in the beach in
Yes,
Dominican
me
Republic.
too.
That's my offshore money. But for people who have significant assets, the Panama Papers, I mean, this is a big problem of people hiding their money offshore. It's very difficult to find. Usually it means involving private investigators. And, you know, there was that case about that Russian couple where she only got $600 million, where she thinks she should have got $4 billion, which, you know, $600 million to you and I perhaps sounds like that's a lot of money. I'd go home with that. But if someone owes you $4 billion, I guess it can make you quite angry that you're getting ripped off. So, yeah, it's very interesting how it's coming to light that a lot of these very wealthy people are hiding their assets. And I'm going to go back to even your normal person or your normal family, there could be the hiding of assets. There are people engaged in cash businesses. And it's not uncommon to hear about someone who claims they only make $30,000 a year, and yet their house is $1.5 million.
Right.
And you're going, how are you going to explain
But
that?
then when spousal support or child support comes up, it's based on the income on paper. And
well, it's based on the income on paper, and then it becomes an issue of becoming an investigator or hiring a forensic accountant.
Forensic accountant at $800 an hour.
Well,
yes, I know people that have thought about it and said, in the end, whatever I'm going to get, I'm going to have to pay out.
Yeah, well, everything you do in a divorce proceeding, there's always a cost-benefit analysis that has to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we're finding that there are a lot of people that are using offshore accounts for this, especially in divorces.
We are finding that, yes. I'm going to go back to that even your normal person will find ways to hide money, and it doesn't matter rich or poor, people are doing it.
But in Panama, my understanding would be that by the time you contact that law firm and set up an account, it's not a cheap process. So you've got to have some sort of assets to make it worthwhile.
Oh, absolutely.
That is, you're not going to do it for $50,000.
No. The cost of moving money offshore, from what I understand or what I've heard about, is it's very, very expensive. And unless you have very serious money to protect or to hide, there's no value in it.
You must have a very interesting job. It must be amazing the things that you hear.
I love what I do for a living, and yes, it's very interesting. Every person has their own unique story, and as I say to people, I know way too much about way too many people, but every day is different, and it's fascinating.
And have people changed? Are they thinking about their children more? In terms of, you know, when you start fighting, only the kids suffer?
Or is the heat of the moment still?
Or is...
Yeah.
Well, people are becoming more educated about the divorce process, which I think is a good thing, because it prevents them from taking steps that are not beneficial to them or their families. Do people think about their children more? I'm going to say that a divorce situation, especially in the beginning, is very heated, very emotional, and I think people sometimes do forget to think about the children, or they're acting in a way that they think is beneficial to the children, perhaps preventing the other partners or spouse from seeing the children, but they think they're doing the right thing, and it may not be the right thing.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.